I never believed the stories people told about the deep woods. I've heard them all. Ghost lights drifting between trees, abandoned cabins that weren't there the day before, voices calling hikers by name. After enough years backpacking, you learn that most of those stories have simple explanations. Fatigue, isolation, bad weather, or people convincing themselves they saw something extraordinary. That's what I believed. Then Ryan opened the door. I haven't used my real name telling this story because I still have family who think Ryan simply got lost. They buried an empty coffin 3 months after we came home. I stood beside it and said nothing because the truth would have sounded crueler than a lie. There were 3 of us that weekend. Ryan, Mason, and me. We'd hiked together for years, long enough to trust each other with our lives. We knew how to navigate without GPS, treat injuries, ration food, and keep calm when things went wrong. We weren't adrenaline junkies. We hiked because we loved finding places where the world felt untouched. That trip was supposed to be our most remote yet. The national forest stretched farther than most people realized. Once you left the marked trails, you could walk for days without seeing another person. That was exactly what we wanted. By late morning on the second day, civilization already felt like another life. The trail had disappeared behind us hours earlier. The only sounds were boots crunching over old leaves, wind rolling through the canopy, and the occasional chatter of squirrels. Then, everything stopped. Ryan slowed first. "You hear that?" Mason looked around. "Hear what?" Ryan frowned. "Nothing." He was right. No birds. No insects. No rustling in the undergrowth. Even the wind seemed quieter. It only lasted a minute before a crow cried somewhere far away, and suddenly the forest woke up again as though nothing had happened. We laughed it off. "Guess we just experienced synchronized paranoia," Mason joked. None of us knew that was the last ordinary conversation we'd have. About an hour later, we stepped into a clearing. Ryan stopped so suddenly I almost walked into him. What the hell? At the center stood an enormous oak door. No walls, no building, no ruined foundation. Just a weathered wooden door standing upright in the middle of untouched wilderness. It looked ancient. The wood had darkened almost black with age, yet there wasn't a hint of rot. Twisting carvings covered its surface, winding through the grain like tree roots had grown inside the timber instead of beneath the soil. The brass handle had turned green with age. Mason laughed nervously. "Okay, that's weird. Movie prop." Ryan asked. "There aren't even tire tracks." He was right. The clearing looked untouched. No footprints. No equipment. Nothing. I walked around it once. Then again. Behind the door, there was only more forest. Exactly what should have been there. I knocked on the wood. Solid. Cold enough to sting my knuckles. Ryan wrapped his hand around the tarnished handle. "Don't," I said. "What?" "I don't know." He smiled. "That's never stopped you before." The handle turned effortlessly. The heavy oak door swung inward with a slow groan. None of us spoke. Beyond the doorway was another forest. Not a different one. The same one. Every tree stood exactly where it should. Every boulder matched ours. Even the slope of the land was identical. But everything was wrong. Every leaf was pale gray. The sunlight came from the opposite direction. The shadows leaned toward us instead of away. Nothing moved. Not a single leaf. The air itself looked frozen. Ryan picked up a dead branch and tossed it through. We watched it land. It made no sound. Not even the faintest rustle. Mason whispered, "Did you hear anything?" I shook my head. Ryan found another stick and slowly reached it through the doorway. We pulled it back. Its tip was coated in frost. The air around us was warm enough for short sleeves. No one laughed anymore. "We should leave," I said. Ryan nodded immediately. "Yeah." We all turned away. We'd barely taken 10 steps before Ryan stopped. "I just want to see." Mason sighed. "Ryan, I'll be right back. No, it's one step. Before either of us reached him, he crossed the threshold. One foot, then the other. The instant his second boot touched the gray forest. Slam! The oak door crashed shut with a force that echoed through the clearing like thunder. Ryan, Mason grabbed the handle. Together we yanked it open. The gray forest was gone. Only our forest remained beyond the doorway. Green leaves, moving branches, birdsong. Ryan had vanished. There wasn't a single place he could have hidden. No rocks, no ravines, nothing. We ran through the doorway, searched behind every tree, called until our voices cracked. No answer. Then Mason grabbed my arm. Look, 3 boot prints. Ryan's, fresh in the dirt. They led away from where the door had stood. 1, 2, 3. Then, nothing. No fourth step. No signs of a struggle. No drag marks. It looked as though the earth had simply forgotten to exist beneath his next foot. A cold breeze brushed my neck. I turned toward the clearing. The door was gone. Only empty grass remained. Mason stared at me. We need to leave. I nodded. Then I reached into my pocket for my compass. The needle spun once, twice, and settled pointing directly at the place where the impossible door had disappeared. For the first few minutes, we refused to panic. Ryan had to be nearby. There was no other explanation our minds would accept. We searched the clearing first, then spread out just far enough to keep each other in sight. Ryan, Mason shouted. His voice bounced through the trees. No answer. I tried next. If this is a joke, it's over. Nothing. The silence that followed felt heavier than silence should. Then Mason called me over. I found his tracks. 3 fresh boot prints pressed into the damp earth. The tread was unmistakable. Ryan had bought those boots 2 years earlier, and we'd teased him because he refused to replace them. The prints led away from the clearing. This time there wasn't just 3. There were dozens. Relief flooded through me. He's walking. We followed them. The tracks wound between old oaks, crossed a shallow creek, and climbed a small ridge. For nearly 15 minutes, they continued normally. Then they began doing something impossible. Without warning, they reversed. Not the direction, the footprints themselves. The heel marks became toe marks. Each print now faced back toward us. It looked as though Ryan had somehow walked backward without ever turning around. Mason knelt beside one. That's not possible. The tracks continued another 20 yards, then ended against solid stone. Nothing beyond them. No scuff moss. No broken branches. Nothing. The forest swallowed him a second time. Neither of us said a word. We simply turned around and started walking. After another hour, my GPS still couldn't find satellites. Neither could Mason's. That wasn't unusual in dense forest. What bothered me was the compasses. Mine pointed north. His pointed southeast. We traded them. Nothing changed. Each compass insisted on a different reality. Let's mark our route, Mason said. He tied a strip of bright orange survey tape around a tree. We'll know if we're walking in circles. It made sense. We continued downhill. 20 minutes later, we found the same strip of orange tape, except it wasn't tied to the tree anymore. It had been woven into a bird's nest nearly 20 feet above our heads. Neither of us spoke. The nest looked old, weathered, as though it had been there for years. Mason stared upward. Did you do that? I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain refused to accept what I was seeing. No, we left the tape where it was. Neither of us wanted it back. That evening, we stumbled onto another campsite. It looked fresh. A small fire still smoldered. 2 folding chairs faced the flames. A metal pot hung above glowing coals. Relief hit us both at once. Thank God, Mason breathed. Someone's here. We hurried into the camp. Hello. No answer. The fire crackled. Steam drifted lazily from the pot. Someone had to be nearby. I lifted the lid. The water was warm. Not hot. Warm. Like whoever owned the camp had stepped away only minutes earlier. Then I noticed the mugs. 3 enamel cups. 1 blue, 1 green, 1 black. Our colors. My backpack hit the ground. Mason. He slowly turned. The sleeping bags. Same brand as ours. The packs. Same model. Even the dents in the cooking pot looked familiar. This. His voice shook. This is our camp. It couldn't be. We hadn't camped here. We'd never been here. Yet every scratch, every piece of gear, every tiny detail belonged to us. Mason reached for his own backpack. It was still on his shoulders. The identical one, lying beside the fire, was empty. A copy. He backed away. We're leaving. Neither of us argued. We left everything exactly where it was. As we climbed the ridge behind the campsite, I looked back. The fire was gone. So was the camp. Only trees remained. Darkness fell quickly. Neither of us wanted to stop. Neither wanted to admit we had no idea where we were. Eventually, exhaustion forced us to pitch our tent. Sleep didn't come easily. Every sound made me reach for my flashlight. Around midnight, someone whispered my name. David. I opened my eyes instantly. Mason was already sitting upright. You heard it. I nodded. Ryan's voice came again. Faint. Guys. It sounded exhausted. Hope surged through me. I scrambled out of the tent. Ryan, over here. The voice drifted through the trees. We followed it. At first it seemed straightforward. Then, without either of us noticing, we lost sight of the tent. The voice remained exactly the same distance away. No matter how fast we walked, no matter how long we followed it, it never grew louder, never faded, always just out of reach. Mason suddenly stopped. Listen. I did. Ryan wasn't breathing. Between every sentence, there was absolute silence. No footsteps, no leaves, no echoes. His voice repeated with the exact same pauses, the exact same tone, the exact same exhaustion. It wasn't calling to us. It was repeating itself, like a recording. Mason grabbed my sleeve. We're going back. We turned around. The tent should have been behind us. It wasn't. The forest looked completely unfamiliar. Panic rose in my throat. Then, a branch snapped. Not ahead. Behind us. We spun around. Nothing. Another snap. To our left. Then another. To our right. Something was moving. Not quickly. Not hunting us. Circling. Always just beyond where our flashlights reached. I caught movement between 2 trees. A figure. Tall. Standing perfectly still. Ryan. No response. I took one cautious step. The figure vanished. Not by running. It simply wasn't there anymore. Mason grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. Don't. Did you see? I know. We stood motionless. Minutes passed. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sound stopped. The forest became normal again. A distant owl called. Wind stirred the leaves. Our tent lantern glowed faintly through the trees. It was less than 50 yards away. Neither of us remembered walking back. Morning should have been a relief. Instead, it made everything worse. My watch read 7:12. Mason's read 11:48. Both were still ticking. Neither had stopped. We compared the dates. Mine said August 18th. His, August 21st. We stared at each other. Neither of us joked anymore. Around noon, we found a shallow stream. A deer stood on the opposite bank. It looked healthy, alert. It lowered its head to drink. The instant its nose touched the water, it jerked backward violently. Its ears flattened. It stared into the woods behind us. Then it bolted, not away from us, away from something neither of us could see. The forest fell silent again. This time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like something had just arrived. Mason slowly reached into his pocket. Without saying a word, he held up the compass. For the first time since Ryan vanished. Both our compasses pointed in the same direction, straight ahead, toward a narrow line of ancient oak trees. Between them, just visible in the distance, stood the weathered edge of an oak door. Only this time, it wasn't alone. There were three more, and one of them was slowly beginning to open on its own. None of us moved. Four doors, standing hundreds of feet apart between the trees. All identical. Same dark oak, same twisting carvings, same tarnished brass handle. The only difference was that one of them stood slightly open. A ribbon of pale gray light spilled through the gap. Mason whispered, "Which one was ours?" I didn't answer, because I honestly didn't know. The one Ryan had disappeared through had vanished. Now there were four, and somehow I knew choosing the wrong one mattered. We approached slowly. The closer we got, the quieter the forest became. A squirrel sprinting across a fallen log suddenly froze, turned around, and fled in the opposite direction. Birdsong stopped. Even the wind seemed unwilling to cross the clearing. When we reached the first door, it refused to budge. The second wouldn't move either. The third opened only an inch before slamming itself shut again. The fourth, the one already cracked open, swung inward with almost no effort. Beyond it waited the gray forest. Only this time, it wasn't empty. There were footprints. Fresh ones. Ryan's. They led away between the pale trees. Mason looked at me. "We're going." I hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to cross. Then I noticed something. A small stone beside the threshold. Someone had scratched a symbol into it. The same twisting pattern carved into the oak door. Except one line had been cut across it, like someone had tried to erase it. Without thinking, I picked up the stone and slipped it into my pocket. The air around us immediately felt warmer. Just enough to notice. I didn't understand why. I only knew it mattered. We stepped through. The silence hit first. Not the absence of sound. The absence of pressure. It felt as though the world itself had stopped breathing. The gray leaves didn't move. The branches didn't sway. Our own footsteps sounded strangely distant, as if someone else were making them. Even my heartbeat felt muffled. We followed Ryan's tracks. Every few yards, they became fainter. Not because the ground changed, because the footprints themselves seemed to fade, as though time was slowly erasing them. Then we found something else. A faded orange strip of survey tape. The one Mason had tied to the tree. Only now it hung from a dead branch. Brittle. Sun-bleached. It looked decades old. Mason slowly reached toward it. The moment his fingers touched the tape, it crumbled into dust. Neither of us spoke. We kept walking. 100 yards later, we found another. Then another. Each older than the last. It was like walking through the remains of every path we'd already taken. Then the forest changed. Without warning, I noticed a pine tree ahead. There hadn't been any pines in this part of the forest. I looked away for only a second. When I looked back, the pine was gone. An oak stood there instead. I stopped. "Mason!" He didn't answer. I turned. He was 20 feet behind me, standing perfectly still, staring into the trees. "What?" He pointed. Between the trunks stood dozens of people. Not moving, not speaking, just watching. Some wore hiking packs. Others wore old flannel jackets. One carried a rusted lantern. A little girl clutched a faded teddy bear. Their expressions weren't frightened. They looked tired, like people waiting for a train that would never arrive. I blinked. They were gone. Only trees remained. "I saw them too," Mason whispered. That scared me more than seeing them. Then we heard footsteps. Real footsteps. Running. "Guys!" Ryan burst through the gray trees. He looked exhausted. His beard had grown in. His clothes were torn. His face was thinner. But he was alive. I ran toward him. We collided so hard we nearly fell over. He grabbed my shoulders. "I knew you'd come." Mason hugged him next. For a few seconds, None of us spoke. Ryan was shaking, not from fear, from relief. I thought I'd never see another person again. How long? I asked. He looked confused. I don't know. His eyes drifted upward. A few years. The words punched the air out of my lungs. What? I stopped counting. He laughed weakly. I forgot what summer smells like. Mason's eyes filled with tears. We're getting you home. Ryan smiled. I'd like that. For the first time since he'd vanished. Hope felt real. We hurried back toward the door. Ryan stayed between us. Every few seconds he glanced behind him. Don't stop walking. We're almost there, I said. I know. His voice trembled. It knows too. I wanted to ask what it was. Instead, I noticed something strange. The gray leaves had begun moving. Not because of wind. They all turned at once, as if thousands of tiny eyes had shifted to watch us. Then the trees groaned. The sound rolled through the forest like an old ship straining against the sea. Ryan froze. No. What? The paths. The door wasn't where we'd left it. The clearing was gone. Only trees. Endless gray trees. Mason looked around wildly. It was right here. Ryan grabbed both our wrists. Don't panic. Where is it? He closed his eyes, then quietly said, Walk backward. What? Trust me. It made no sense. But we'd run out of better ideas. We took 3 slow steps backward. The forest shivered. An opening appeared between the trees. The door stood there again, exactly where it hadn't been a second earlier. No explanation. Just there. We ran. Ryan reached it first. 1 foot crossed into the real forest. Then the other. Sunlight struck his face. Color returned to his skin. He laughed. A real laugh. The kind I'd begun to think I'd never hear again. We did it. Mason grabbed him in a crushing hug. I couldn't stop smiling. For one perfect moment, it was over. Then, every bird in the forest stopped singing. Ryan's smile disappeared. He looked past us, not at the door, beyond it. His face turned pale. No! Before either of us could react, his body jerked backward, not violently, almost gently, like someone had taken his hand. I grabbed his arm. Mason wrapped both hands around his backpack straps. We pulled. Ryan screamed. For one glorious second, he was winning. Half his body crossed into our world. His boots hit the dirt, his knees, his waist. I could feel his weight shifting toward us. Then I looked behind him. The gray forest wasn't empty anymore. Hundreds of people stood between the trees, silent, watching. Some reached toward Ryan, not grabbing him, simply waiting. Ryan saw them too. His expression changed. The panic left his face, replaced by unbearable sadness. He looked at me. I remember now. What? My little sister. Tears rolled down his face. I couldn't remember her name. I tightened my grip. We're taking you home. He shook his head. I already missed it. His voice was barely a whisper. Whatever time passes there. He looked back at the waiting figures. Passes here too. My stomach turned. He smiled through tears. I'm not the one you left yesterday. I refused to let go. So did Mason. Ryan slowly pried my fingers loose. I don't belong to your world anymore. No, the last thing he did was push us backward through the doorway. The heavy oak door slammed shut between us. The impact knocked both of us to the ground. We threw the door open again. Green forest, moving leaves, warm sunlight, no gray world, no Ryan. The door remained standing. Its carvings slowly shifted beneath the wood, like roots growing beneath bark. A new pattern appeared. At first it looked random. Then I realized what it was. 3 boot prints, walking toward the center of the door. Only 2 walked away. The door had remembered what we wanted to forget. Search teams never found Ryan. We told them he became separated from us during heavy fog. It was the closest thing to the truth we could manage. Mason never set foot in another forest. He still can't. Sometimes he calls me in the middle of the night after dreaming about gray leaves that don't move. I still hike, not because I enjoy it anymore, because every so often I find something that shouldn't exist. A tree carved with twisting roots, a compass that spins for no reason, a stretch of forest where birds refuse to sing. I've spent years reading missing person reports, ranger logs, and forgotten online forums. Different forests, different countries, different decades. The details always change, except for one. Someone always mentions finding a clearing that didn't feel empty. It felt like it was waiting, and I finally understand the truth Ryan never had time to explain. The doors aren't entrances, they're invitations. They're waiting for someone curious enough to open them, because something on the other side has been waiting just as patiently for someone to come through. If this story kept you looking over your shoulder, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe for more slow burn horror stories, wilderness mysteries, and unsettling encounters every week. If you've ever experienced something in the woods that you still can't explain, tell us about it in the comments. I read every one of them. Until next time, stay safe. And if the forest ever goes completely silent, don't wait around to find out why.